As I mentioned at the outset, tomorrow is the last day of school for us at St. John's in Canton, and we are also in wedding season. And next couple of weekends, we've got weddings scheduled. So these young men and women who'll be serving, I'm going to give you a project. Let's count how many of the brides have a veil over their headdress when they come in for the wedding. Because most of the time when we think of a veil or we see a veil, it's at a wedding. And there was a medieval tradition. The bride wore a veil over her face, so when the father brought her to the altar, the groom would be the first one to see her. But the veil that St. Paul is talking about in today's first reading is both a physical veil and he's using it metaphorically. When Moses went up on the mountain the second time to receive the law from God, and he spent 40 days with God, if you remember. He came back down with the tablets, with the 10 Commandments. But having been in God's presence, when he came back, the book of Exodus tells us that his face shone so brightly, some effect of having been in God's presence, that it was unsettling for the people. And so Moses put a veil over his face until that condition kind of ameliorated. Well, in the temple, in the Holy of Holies, in the place where the ark was stored, they would put a veil. And that veil was to show the God's presence and to put a barrier, if you will, between man and God. And what St. Paul is saying in the reading is unveil ourselves. Put on Christ. Don't let something, whether it's something physical or something in our head, in our background, whatever it might be, some sinfulness, some anger, some hostility, some jealousy, some covetousness, whatever it might be, shed it and let your relationship with Christ be direct, face to face, unveiled. Our gospel today from Matthew is a continuation of where we've been the last 2 days and where we'll be all through next week at daily Mass as we hear from Jesus teaching on the Sermon of the Mount. And what Jesus does is he takes the commandments and he breaks them down. And instead of saying, now here's how you can get around that commandment, here's the escape clause, here's the fine print that tells you how you don't have to follow the commandment, he does the complete opposite. And what Jesus does is he lays out the commandment, and then he tells us that we want to zealously fulfill that commandment. We want to excel at discipleship and faithfulness to the law. So today, Jesus is saying to us, you've heard that you shall not kill your brother. Don't be liable for murder. But he's saying, don't say, well, I won't kill my brother because I might get caught or I might get punished. Jesus is saying, you don't want to kill someone else because you want to love them. And he's saying, don't even get angry enough that you would think about killing someone. It's a challenge. All of the Sermon of the Mount is taking the law that was given to Moses and asking us to not only live it, but to apply it to ourselves rigorously. So he says, don't even let your anger be such that you'd want to kill someone. And then he takes it to even another level. And he says, in fact, if you and your brother, and he means, frankly, any other person, are angry enough with each other that there's hostility, that there's tension, then don't come before my altar making sacrifice and coming to me while you're not speaking to someone else, while you're angry, while you're engaged in a court battle or a war of words or whatever. And he says, no, even before you get to my altar, go find that brother, go find that person with whom you have a dispute and settle it. Make peace. Love one another. Then come before my altar, because then you will be perfect. It can be easy to hold on to grudges and resentments. And sometimes forgiving other people is hard because sometimes we really have been hurt. God knows this. And he's patient with us because sometimes it does take a while to get over the hurt or the anger. But he never says it's okay not to forgive. He never says it's okay to be angry. So let alone is it ever going to be okay to hate. Christ's invitation in today's gospel is to be as faithful a disciple as we possibly can, to take away the veils that we apply ourselves to the commandments, the veils that we put between us and him that excuse not fulfilling the commandments, not fulfilling the law. St. Paul, in the first reading, tells us, remove the veil. Let's have as close, let's have as pure, and let's have as honest a relationship as we can with Christ. It is ultimately for us the greatest source of joy, love of him, and love of one another.